Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. Welcome to episode 154 and Rob Keyes' 8th appearance on the podcast. You're slowly crawling to 10. Kofi was kind of gaining on you for a little bit.
Oh boy.
But you are overtaking the by a substantial margin now.
Good to know. I was in the shadows very intentionally from any sort of media because I've been, not even my own podcast. I'm so busy with work projects that I will hopefully come back to this podcast and share another time. But no, I had to come back and make sure I maintain the record because I need to be number one.
Yeah, well, it's awesome because we've already talked Creature Commandos. The last time you were on, I believe the debut was 2 episodes. So I had seen that and you had seen the whole season. So that was back in January. And now we have the cinematic debut of the DC universe. So let's not waste any time. I know everybody's been amped to hear every opinion possible. So we're going to jump into non-spoilers for Superman. And then there will be a queue for full spoilers. And don't worry, there will be a lot to talk about.
What is this? Crypto! What the hey, dude? I thought you destroyed the whole Superman robots. I thought I told you to keep an eye on him.
We feed the canine, but he is unruly. And he realizes we are not flesh and blood and couldn't, in our heart of hearts, care less whether he lives or dies.
Okay, Rob, this is, cards on the table for me. This was my most anticipated movie of the year. Gun to my head, and I'm sure Jermaine would love this. If I had to pick a universe that I want to be successful, it would be a DC version of a comics universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in with anticipation, but I was hesitant, mostly because for whatever reason, and I think this came down to however the videos were compressed in the trailers, the cinematography was one of the main concerns I had going in. And now I've seen the movie twice, and while it is certainly not perfect, my optimism and, pun intended, hope for the future of the DCU is in a whole different space than it was, say, even though I loved Creature Commandos, that felt much more tangentially James Gunn previous DCEU stuff, where this being the theatrical birth and the debut of Action Comics' first character, and now the DCU's first theatrical release, David Cornsweet, everybody through the film getting a real understanding of what the movie's about, more so the second time. Like, I loved this.
You loved the whole movie. That's it. It worked.
No, I would say in general, it does a really great job of selling what this DC universe is, in terms of the interconnectivity that already exists. We're jumping in already into a world with established stuff, and we can get into that in non-spoilers. But in terms of, it's so funny because the prevailing thought I've had leading up to this and around Superman in general is so interesting because Batman has had such an illustrious career, and the spectrum to which that character tonally has been adapted for popular media is the gambit of stuff. If you go to, and they all seem to have their place and still get positive reception. That's not to say one is better than the other. Everyone will have their preferences tonally for what fits with those characters. But when you go to, like, running through all the history, the Adam West era is unintentionally the 50s wacky era of Batman. And then you got that with a big budget, with the Schumacher stuff. And then we don't have to talk about the tonally dark, but still wacky Burton of it all. And then the grounded, this is real Nolan element. And then a more comic book-esque, but obviously still substantially darker tone with Ben Affleck. And then essentially, and this is not to be dismissive of it because I loved the Batman, but a very Fincher-esque, much more in that Batman Hush year one aesthetic with the Batman. And Superman, unfortunately, because of this character, it seems tonally there are 2 expectations. There is the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner. I'm not going to include Richard Lester in that because I do not enjoy those films, nor were they nearly as successful. And then you had the much more gritty aspect with Henry Cavill. And that seems to be the diametrically opposed tones people want in their Superman, which the irony to me about this whole thing is there has already been, in my opinion, a successful blend of both of those things with Superman and Lois, which I know a lot of people fell off of the CW in general for a
Yeah.
lot of valid reasons. But I covered season 4 and the whole season as in total with Andy, and my whole perspective shifted because they allowed somebody to play Superman for a long time. And we went back and forth on whether Tom Welling played Superman or not in Smallville, but I won't digress into that. And even that show had a wide variety of tones. We had the farm boy, we had the Neo outfit, and then we had the proto Superman leading into this. And David Cornsweet to me reminded me, not in a way where I'm going to, these characters are so old. We're reaching 90 years with a lot of these. With Superman, it'll be in 2028. Batman, it'll be 2029, where so much of them has been done. But in live action, it seems to be people have specific ideas of what they want. But animation has allowed these characters to have such a significant wide range of portrayals. And being a kid of the 90s, specifically, this is in the early 2000s, but George Newbern, who voiced the character through the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited run, that's the version I hear when I read the comics. And he played the Boy Scout and the thing that a lot of people sort of stick to with Superman, but also showed he had depth and layers to him. Like, if you were bonded with Superman and he trusted you, that was it, and he was with you for life. And there are episodes of that show, to call things like Better World for the DCAU fans, where we really saw him on the brink of losing his mind because of the mistrust of somebody like Lex Luthor abusing the public sentiment. And and I'm not going to compare the Superman movies in this because I just don't want to have that conversation. I do want to just talk about Superman 2025. I really do wish it was called Superman Legacy, because what this movie winds up being about is so inherently connected to that David Cornsweet plays this character much more akin. And it's funny because I know you're a comic book reader. We've heard all about Superman or All-Star Superman. And
Yeah.
I've read that. I've seen the animated film. And I get where they're coming from with that. But this was much more to me Superman from Superman Public Enemies, which is interesting because it's a two-hander with Batman, as well as something like Superman for All Seasons. There's a portrayal of the character in other versions where he's much smarter than the typical, I would say, average Detective Comics character. I'm meaning the whole universe, not just the Batman issue of the comics. But somebody in terms of this being the farm boy who is so inherently good as a person, and seeing that as the objective reasoning for what he does. And we get to learn so much about him through what he experiences in this, that sweet spot in getting somebody who feels like a modernization of the character while still feeling inherently connected to the past versions of this character I loved. And before you jump in, I would be remiss without mentioning Rachel Brosnahan. I knew she was going to absolutely destroy Lois Lane because she's a brilliant actress. And again, to me, the distillation of the variety of the ways these characters have been played and the compilation that the DCU was allowed to do in talking about and having those characters featured in stories for nearly, I think Superman, James Strecker's going to hate this, but I don't remember when Superman the Animated Series debuted. But at least a decade getting to be with those characters, where there's even an outfit in this film that people have seen in the trailers that is just a live action recreation of the Dana Delaney voiced version of the character. And we get a Lex who's connected to other portrayals of that character, but really seems like they've taken everything from the history of this and they've funneled it into like these pure versions. I don't want to talk about who's better than the other because that's just exhausting.
Yeah.
But in terms of this really feeling, and it was used a lot, and I think it's an apt description. This is the most comic booky Superman movie ever, and like that is a benefit and a disadvantage. So in seeing the movie, I really enjoyed it much more the second time, because in the way we've had the release of modern comic book movies, MCU is an example of almost muting the color of the comics palette to eventually embracing it later on. And ironically, James Gunn working through those movies, getting the Guardians stuff, like that was much more sci-fi and Space Odyssey poppy with color. To do this with the DC universe, it really felt like whatever the object, plan, and lesson of this movie was, like I understood what the thesis was. And there are bumps along the 2 hour and 9 minute runtime. But for me, this movie distills on the budding relationship with Lois and Clark and Superman's place in a 2025 society, which is as modern as we can get. This is not distilling it to something like the Sam Raimi's, which are, yes, they're made in 2000s, but it's a very 1960s-esque world. So bridging that gap in the way that they did, like I really enjoyed it. However, my main criticism, and I said this in my trailer reactions, and this has gone on way too long, I apologize, is the one thing I'm disappointed by is I love John Williams' score. It's iconic from 1978. You think of Superman when you hear that, but there have been other composers who have risen to the challenge of creating a new Superman score. There's been many versions. Shirley Walker, Hans Zimmer, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the composer for Superman and Lois. There have been other versions that create their own version of the Superman score and not getting a new one and relying on nostalgia with a remix of John Williams. That to me was a little disappointing, but of course, when used in the movie, it's epic because it's one of the most iconic John Williams scores of all time.
Yeah. Also, if they had gone with this legacy title, it would even fit more, right?
Yep.
Look, I love hearing you say up front that you love this because you are, and the way you speak about this, you're a super fan. You know the composers of the music. You've seen every animated version. You're very familiar with all the live action adaptations on TV or the big screen. So that was key. It's like Gunn's mission was to appease the super fans, but also appeal to everyone else. And I've said this probably on here, numerous discussions about versions of the DC universe and how they can bring it back. Certainly in other podcasts and across the site. And the thing that mattered most is not the box office. And it's funny because there's a lot of headlines last week about like what determines success. Is 700 million enough? Is it a bomb? Is it making money's back? And James Gunn laughs at that. And I laugh at that too, because to me, nothing matters. And it sounds ridiculous. And I hate to say it. Nothing matters more than the start of the theatrical version of this new DC universe and this long-term investment from just Warner Brothers Discovery and the mess over there. This had to get positive reception. That's the only thing that matters. And it did. And I hate to quote Rotten Tomatoes, but everyone does. It is a focal point of everything, including a huge part of the social media marketing campaign for Superman over the last week. Audience reactions on there, the early verified reactions, incredibly positive. The reaction sense positive. The critic score, positive. And keep in mind, we'll say this for the listeners. The Rotten Tomato meter score is not like the score. It is the average of people who gave it a positive versus a negative. So if 80% or above of critics are saying this is good, that's what gives you that. It doesn't mean it's great. And that's where I kind of fall. I think this is a very good movie. And I think that's what it needed to be. It had so much baggage going into it. The universe itself still has baggage going into it. There are cameos in this film related to baggage, the good baggage that they're going to carry forward. We know that because of what's coming. So that's hilarious. But I'm happy to say none of this was surprising to me. And by the way, let me take a step back here. I called you a super fan. We need to note for the listeners, you are wearing a Smallville shirt with a Superman poster behind you. It looks perfect. The colors are perfect. And you're wearing a Blue Jays hat. And here's me over here wearing an Alien Earth hat and a Colossal Biosciences shirt. I am so unprepared to talk DC.
When we are reviewing this, as of right now, or recording this, I should say, the Blue Jays are leading the AL division going into the All-Star break.
Hells yeah, they are. Go
Even
Jays.
more, Even more apt. Well, I think it's funny because this character is somebody like the divisive nature to which the conversation's been had. And I don't even want to address the stuff that was leading into it, but it's true. Like looking at how things are marketed now and the common misconception, and this is why I hate Rotten Tomatoes, is as you said, and the mass audience doesn't understand 82 is not an A minus. Like everyone
Right.
gave this an
It
A
literally could be
minus review.
60%. Every single review
Yeah.
there could be 3 out of 5.
Yep.
But the fact that they all agree that it's good, and it is good. And I'll go back to, I didn't actually finish what I was saying. Look, I think it's very good. I think from a technical standpoint, and I think you referenced the trailers as well. I didn't actually like the trailers. You know, I like seeing Superman in the suit. You know, those funny moments of crypto, whatever. None of it was like, oh, this is awesome. None of it. And in fact, some of it I thought was kind of poor. And there's some weird, goofy social media reaction to certain scenes, but it's all whatever. Who cares? But look, James Gunn was the right person to do this. And and I should say, I did the set visit for this film last summer. I went to Cleveland to visit this, and the theme, and you touched on this with some of the visuals. You know, the whole theme there was not just hope; it was like the timelessness of everything. That the whole conceit to the production design and the aesthetic was timelessness, and that's not just like you look in the Daily Planet and you see these old tables and this really broad structure, this old ass building with like modern tech on top of it, and a mixture of costumes that look like they're straight from the 50s and 60s with vibrant 70s colors, but also flair from what seems like something from a fashion show that came out last week. It's very interesting. It's all very purposeful, but it only works if the characters feel that way too. And you've watched the thematic arcs of the main characters, and those are timeless things. The Lois and Clark relationship is a very cool thing to kind of really treat as a center point of all the action. It kind of grounds it a little bit. And I kind of wish, to be honest, there was a little more of that and a little more of Daily Planet versus some of the other things we do end up seeing in this film. And I'll take another step back from that and say, from a technical standpoint, I do not find this film impressive. The score, like you said, it's, you know, whatever. They went the John Williams way, and it, the iconic moments work. And I like some of the soundtrack choices, especially near the end. That's kind of fun. And it's funny because James Gunn, everyone knows him for his soundtracks. He literally builds Guardians movies around them. He plays live music on set as the actors act. This is different. This time he's working with a score most of the time versus a soundtrack. So it was kind of interesting to see what he did with that. But to be honest, I found that it worked to enhance the visuals, but I didn't find it memorable on its own. The same way a lot of Marvel movies, just kind of like, you don't think about that. Whereas a lot of DC stuff historically, I would think about that. This is iconic things that you could go to an orchestra and just hear that and have that same feeling. This movie doesn't really necessarily have that. The visuals, same thing. The cinematography, same thing. It's all serviceable. None of it matters, though, because the key of James Gunn is that he takes weird and obscure characters, or in this case, mainstream characters as well, and he makes them likable. He makes them feel real. They have ups and downs. They have conflict, and that stuff matters. And he's so good at taking obscure characters and making them matter, or adding layers that are just really funny and spankable, like how he treats Jimmy Olsen in this film and other things like that, or some of the other cameos. And then he also, the second layer of that is that he also fills a lot of his roles with people he trusts, his friends and family. They're in all of his roles. Nathan Fillion is in everything, and it works because he knows them on set. They're not. He has no policy on set, and they just deliver. They can deliver quirky, villainous, or good, or complicated characters who shouldn't otherwise be characters we care about at all. And I think all of that works. He made so many characters I thought I didn't even have an interest to see, and he made them cool. And to be honest, almost all of them I want to see more of. And that is a testament. And it's what you and I talked about with Creature Commandos. I was so mixed kind of going into that, but each episode completely sold me on the next thing, and it pulled me in. And the same way when Superman began, I didn't like the opening. I was kind of like, this is not really, it was a little over the top, but it kept pulling me in and pulling me in and pulling me in. And it's directly, it's because of the intrinsic nature of how he treats these characters. The character arcs are pulling me in. And I think he's an absolute wizard at that. And he pre-plans all of that. So it makes me very excited to see, not that this film is designed to set up future things, but it makes me excited to see future things because I know the meticulous pre-planning that goes into it. Without going to spoilers, it is funny that the thing I saw on set, the specific scenes are not even in the theatrical version of this film. I have this weird luck of going to the set of superhero movies, and the thing I see does not appear in the movie. So we'll talk about that in the spoiler section.
Yeah, I think honestly, the way, what I found really interesting and I said this to my wife when I got home after seeing it, which was that the trailers did, up until the tickets have gone on sale trailer, did a
Mhm.
really good
That was a good one.
job of not giving us really any context, which in modern trailers, like the whole bag is given away. And so to kind of have a vague idea of scenes and not really, like, even being like a super fan of the comics and understanding like narrative structure, where these things were going to fit.
Mhm.
Now, I think the tickets on sale trailer will lead you into direction. So I feel like we've given enough of our general thoughts to kind of dive into what really works about this.
Yeah, no, I have one point I want to say, but it is spoiler specific.
Perfect.
With regards to my feelings about the whole thing. But yeah.
Great. All right. So we're going to jump into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, you have been warned. If you did see the film, great. Now you can listen to the conversation about that, and make sure not to skip out on question of the week responses and what I will be talking about next week. You have been warned.
So this guy just flew into Midtown and started attacking people, demanding for Superman to show up?
Yeah, it's all there in my article.
And I'd actually have to make it through your writing, Clark. Knowledge is worth many sacrifices. That isn't one of them.
Ha ha ha, very funny, Lois.
All right, Rob, you had a quarter in you about something you wanted to talk about. So why don't we start there?
So, how do I say this? You mentioned up front like the comic booky descriptor, and it is very much that, and that's kind of cool. I mean, we've seen it the other way. You can't start a universe with the focal point, entry point being Superman, because his arc doesn't make sense. There are so many characters that came before, and yeah, just bring it all in from the beginning. We know where we're at now. We've learned from previous iterations of DC and every other universe out there. So it's good on them for just doing that. And then good on Gunn for like really going for it. Like I love that in the background where you just see like the Justice Gang fighting the giant jellyfish thing, and it's just like, yeah, that's just what happens. And on set, they wouldn't tell us there was a fight, and maybe that changed. They told us initially that was just a thing in the background. When you're in Metropolis, you just may see things like that in space because that's just the universe they live in. Aliens are a thing. But also, unfortunately, pocket dimensions are a thing. And like again, look, this is the comic book nature. I get it, but I think I was starting to glaze over when we're in the pocket dimension and they're getting pulled down the pixelated river. And then, of course, with all the, everyone makes fun of the third act CG-ness of most comic book films. And this one, it's the dimensional rift tearing apart the earth and through Metropolis. And I'm like, ugh, I don't care. I just want to see the character moments. So that's, what I mean? I say that because these are kind of spoilery specific locations or happenings. But it does speak to like, I don't need that. The Gunn, his selling point is characters, ensembles. I love the Daily Planet crew doing that, but we barely got to see Perry do anything. You see, he'll get 2 moments where he spoke, and he's got a cigar the whole time. Let him be cool, and you got Wendell playing him. You got an incredible actor, incredible set. I wish we got a little more screen time shifted towards them, a little less of like we're in the pocket dimension, going through cages and stuff. But I get it to service the story, but it's just not the part that that pulls me in. You know what I mean? So I'm curious how you thought about those, the visual nature of these extra locations.
Yeah, I think one of the things you brought up in non-spoilers is a really good place to start, which is there are moments that are awesome, but what makes them not iconic, and that's not to be like, well, it doesn't look good. Like they're serviceable because you're playing, again, a score we're very familiar with. I went and saw Superman the movie with live orchestra in Toronto.
Wow,
And
how was that?
It was absolutely incredible. You're sitting watching the movie and you forget there are human beings 4 feet underneath playing it live.
That speaks exactly to the power of that score.
Yep.
Imagine we had a totally new version of that. And I say that it's probably a stupid idea, to be honest. And I'm sure they had a million meetings about that. If they went totally different direction, everyone would be saying that doesn't feel like Superman. You kind of have to hit that. It's part of his DNA. That sound is really part of what we think as the Superman legacy, right? So I get it. I'm not going to hark on that. I just didn't have that feeling from the music like I would love to feel as part of Superman.
Well, it's funny because Bruce Timm, who's obviously one of the minds behind the entire DC animated universe, has this theory. Yeah. Has this theory that every Superman score, you can sing the word Superman in it. And he does it in, I want to say it's the commentary track for one of the Mr. Mixus Spitlick episodes. And he specifically references it in Shirley Walker's, which was the score for Superman the Animated Series. And there are shots that are really cool. I think what's interesting, and actually something I appreciated, because we talked about this, it's a clip I put out for Creature Commandos where it's like, and I was yelling this, it's not a new universe. We're just like, it's like Earth, it's DCEU Earth 2. That's the way I would describe it if for a comic book fan, based on what we know has continued. I think one of the things you referenced is, and honestly, I just kind of want to pivot past it because it's just there for comedy, which is fine, which is there's a Peacemaker cameo. I'm going to say it's not the Peacemaker, which we'll find out in Peacemaker season 2.
You've been watching the trailers.
I have been watching the trailers. It's a Peacemaker. But in terms of the lore, like one of my favorite elements about this, and this is a criticism to use Superman's best friend, a lot of Batman movies aren't about Batman. Like if you look up the screen time of most of his films, it's very rare that Batman has the most of the screen time. It's usually done to Bruce or the villains. I mean, it's usually the villains. And this movie, Clark is barely in the film, but like that the duality of Clark Kent versus Superman's always been debated as to which one is the performance. I've always settled on Clark is the person, and he has to be Superman because he has to be Ubermesh to be beloved and everything, and really getting to see inside his mentality. And the selling point for me more than anything with Superman is Clark with his ma and pa, and I absolutely adored that sequence. You didn't need any more of it. It
Perfect.
sells their relationships and the exploration of who Clark is and who he sees Superman is and why, with his dynamic with Lois. Like that spunky cynic that she is, just pessimistically looking at, well, yeah, okay, you're doing things for good, and approaching it from that complete standpoint and seeing how they're at odds, whether it be through the justification of the articles he's writing about himself and that scene. There's a clip of it, getting to see that interaction. And similarly to other versions, like one of the things, and it's been I'd say relatively fair criticism of some other Supermen post Christopher Reeve, is people just sort of doing that, where a bumbling moron Clark doesn't fit in this world, where he's just kind of an oblivious person. I will say, and this is something that's happened more recently in other DC things, specifically Penguin, where he had to be Oz Cobb. He couldn't be Oswald Cobblepot. And James has said this. He's like, well, we needed to find a reason for why the glasses work. So like we just threw in like a hypno thing.
Yeah.
And I that drove me absolutely crazy. It's like there's so many other things going on. Who cares? Like it has been a part of the character for 86 years or 7 years. Like who cares how the
I
glasses work?
I didn't even think about that. I didn't mind it at all. I think it's almost. I wonder if the primary driver for that is just letting Guy Gardner be comedic in that whole sequence where he just like name drops Clark in front of Lois in their like half-built Justice Gang headquarters.
Yeah.
That
You know
shit was
he's Clark
funny.
Kent too.
Yeah, but the way he danced around it for like 45 seconds before just saying it, and
Yep.
Lois, you set it up from her. Rachel, I mean, like
Oh.
acting sweet, like she absolutely carries the film. Like
Mhm.
she's a linchpin, and this ties into what you were saying earlier. The relationship between those two and those apartment moments where they're bickering or they're sharing a tender moment or like discussing the ethics of what he's doing. All these things are cool, but this was a big talking point on set was the casting process. They were not casting Lois and they were not casting Clark. They were casting Lois and Clark. And so both of those two actors, David and Rachel, did various chemistry tests with other actors on both sides of that. And it was that pairing together. That's what James Gunn was casting. He was casting a relationship. And that's cool. You don't see that often.
Nope.
There's always chemistry tests. But the two leads of the beginning of a franchise, like that's very cool to me. And I saw that. And I think I wrote this in my amazing set visit report on screenrant.com.
I read it.
They are such wonderful ambassadors for this brand because in a lot of ways, while they are performing, certainly there are elements of Lois and Superman and of Lois Lane in both of those actors, and the way they speak, they are so wise beyond their years and they speak so intelligently and the little things that that David did, where he made sure everyone on set, everyone in the room got to ask a question. And he was like so direct and so honest, and he made jokes about himself. It was just amazing. He even brought his dog into the room. There was a dog running around. His little, I forget the dog's name, but yeah, just cool moments like that. So I really did appreciate that. And I was going to say one more thing related to that, but I don't recall. But sorry, I interrupted your thought there. I just wanted to drop that in.
Yeah, and so getting to establish the universe in the way that it does, I kind of enjoyed the sort of breakdown. It was 3,000 years ago, 30 years ago, 3 years ago,
That was a very last minute addition to, but that was not part of the plan. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because it had leaked somewhere that it was going to have a Star Wars-esque opening, which is not the way that I would describe that at all. Because it's not a crawl. It's
I get
4
it,
sentences.
It's like a timeline contextualizing text at the beginning of the film with not space, but Antarctica background.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was disappointed by, because it's been a lot of glowing comments so far, is the hammer of Boravia, which is it's Israel and Palestine. Just happens to be in the DC universe, is that throwing us directly into that conflict, I didn't mind. But in terms of his involvement in what's going on, because the main crux of the whole story is Superman's place on Earth and Lex trying to swell public opinion so people hate him so he can legally arrest him and throw him in the prison, which I didn't necessarily love as well. But one of the things that of contention, and I actually really like this stuff, it's been in more modern elements of the comics as well as some other adaptations, looking at the way the Waynes are looked at. Like, they used to be these prodigal couple of Gotham, and it's been skewed much more the other way with Telltale's Batman game, and then the way that they approach them in the Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And Jor-El in Smallville, that's why it's called Luthor Corp in this movie. It's LexCorp and everything else because Lex didn't found Luthor Corp. It was done by his father. And in this movie, getting to see that Jor-El and Lara are aliens, which is a part of the conversation as to who Superman is more than anything. And it's the one thing I'll address, because it's been hilarious to me, is that people clearly have never ever paid attention to Superman's origin story, because he has always, by legal definition, been an illegal alien in the United States. He was not born there. That's what that means. He was co-created by a Canadian, and I'm a little disappointed Toronto, of all places, didn't get a fan screening. But that to be a part of the character, and with the modernization on the conversation about that, somebody who is as popular as the Man of Steel is, and getting to see somebody who is at this point on his own dealing with all of that. And I like the way that I love that the interview that Lois is giving, where she is including things she would know and things she knows Clark has said, and seeing the off the record just go up and down. And that to me gave me the exact same feeling of Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve the very first time, the Good Evening Miss Lane, and seeing David not physically change in a way where it's like, oh, he went from shrunken to like tall, because he doesn't have to hide that with Lois.
Yeah.
But just like the little shift in the posture, and his voice is a little bit deeper. And then every time one of the questions kind of tricks him up, he's like, hey, like, what do you do? Like, just seeing the immediate shift back and forth was so entertaining.
Can I tell you a little bit about context for that?
Absolutely.
The way David prepared the character of playing Clark versus Superman versus the Superman who is free to talk about his identity. He actually kind of did a little the inverse. When he was trying to be Clark, he was trying to be, well, first of all, in costume design, his suits are oversized.
Yep.
So he's meant to be a little lanky. You can see him walking through the street. It's in every marketing shot ever, where he's like dodging people. He's got the briefcase.
That's the one scene of Clark on the move in the movie.
Yeah, I do feel like I feel like there's supposed to be more newsroom moments where he's doing stuff, and the only time we see him is when he's like they're all kind of looking at the TV and talking, and he leaves, and then we never really like
No,
ever
he's
see Clark
Clark
again.
for maybe 5. Like Clark in Metropolis, he's maybe Clark for 5. Like that version of Clark, the hiding Clark, he's maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I do wonder in the production process how much that potentially could have changed. I feel like there was more, and the way like the actors who played all the reporters like spoke about their relationships and roles, it feels like they had a lot more to go on than just like each character gets one thing. Like Michaela Hoover said like nothing the whole film.
I
And,
mean,
Buddy
but
with
to
the-
be
Buddy
fair,
with the mustache.
that is Cat Grant. Like she's not a character with depth.
No, totally. But I feel like there was more interactions between them. Like there's a reason they put all 6 of them on Mr. Terrific's ship.
Yeah.
That seems to pay off something never happened. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yep.
Otherwise, why do that? Why have that logistics? To just have Lois fly whoever. You know what I mean? It was a very weird thing. So I feel like there's missing parts there. In the same way, and I'll come back to this in a sec, it was very clumsy, I thought, how in Baravia, the border fight.
Baravia and my brain wants to call it Johannesburg. I have to look this up because I keep forgetting what it is because they are countries
Yeah,
that
it's got longer than you.
Jarhanapur.
Johannesburg, yeah, awkward naming for sure. So it's supposed to be like this rock star moment when Guy and Hawk Girl show up and like fight, but I think there should be a little bit more there. Like, how did they get there? Was there a conversation? I know that shouldn't be as much of a surprise as it is. It just feels like a little unearned. Like, I want to see the moment when they're like, "Yeah, Lex is lying. This is the right thing to do."
You only see Hawk Girls because she's like washing her hair.
Yeah, they're watching
TV.
it. They're watching.
Yeah.
It's true. They're watching it. But I wish there was a little more like that. There should have been a moment before that where Guy Gardner steps up because Mr. Terrific's doing his thing.
Yep.
Who's incredible, by the way. 10 out of 10.
So good.
And he was also badass on set. The day I'll come back to that in a sec. So that was a kind of cool thing. But look, I think people listening to this podcast and podcasts like it, they want us here. You know, they came here to listen to us talk politics. So let's go. I'm glad finally someone said it. This movie makes a bold move and says that, killing unarmed innocent children is bad. I'm glad James Gunn went for it. Bold move, Hollywood. Bold move, Hollywood. Somebody had to say it. Killing kids is bad. Killing unarmed people is bad. It's bad. Thank you, James Gunn, man. Changing the world here. So the thing I'll say about, we can go to the on-set thing. So
sure.
The day we're on set was when they moved from all the stage shooting in Atlanta. They went to Svalbard in Norway to shoot some exterior stuff, which was a complete waste of money. It was just for some B-roll, basically. Like, they just wanted to say they went there to make it feel like it's on location. But all the inside of like the Fortress of Solitude and even the doors was all shot on stage. But when we were in Cleveland, it was when they kind of first were shooting out in public. So for everyone was like, nerves on set. And it's the first time, no matter what you do. And they lined up all the picture cars on both sides to like make sure the public, passersby can't see. Passersby? Yeah, can't see. But of course, all the windows are there. So there's hundreds and hundreds of people looking down, taking photos. And while we're on set, we're inside the Daily Planet. So they built the whole Daily Planet, big sphere thing. You walk around the globe. We're inside this like decrepit room, had no windows, just waiting for hours. And we're talking to the production designer for an hour, the executive producer, just waiting for the talent. Meanwhile, on our phones, we can see Twitter is blowing up with people sharing photos of like Mr. Terrific in costume, Mr. Superman in costume. And we're like, why are we inside? We're learning more from Twitter than being on set. And it's just the way they scheduled it and what they wanted us to see and not see. But when we stepped outside, now I understand what it actually was. But it was like the sequence at the end when like they arrested Lex Luthor and they brought his craft and they parked it in the street. And then Mr. Terrific's craft lands and it's flown by Lois and they all come out. That's why that was the day we went, because all the cast was essentially there. Makes sense, right? Including Eve with her purple dress was coming out, freed from the pocket dimension. So it was a smart day to bring us. So we saw the front of that Luthor ship and the ramp, but we had no idea what that was because we also saw most of Mr. Terrific's craft with the ramp. We're like, why is there 2 ships? What is this? We had there was no explanation that it was Lex Luthor also had a craft that comes from his building. That was never a talking point anywhere. So that was confusing. And the thing on set we saw, and by the way, there was also things on in the scene that didn't appear in the film. So it's there's obviously rubble everywhere and there's police cars and there's a bunch of extras and there's military guys like passing, making people like evacuate or whatever. there's also like a cop car that has been like people are busting out of it. So there's a bunch of criminals, like there's a criminal triplets wearing like matching costumes, all trying to run away. And it's like that's not in the film. And the scene we saw, the touching moment, was Superman going to the corner, like when Crypto lands in the movie, and you see him playing with those 3 monkeys.
Yep.
What actually happens that we saw, I say actually happens, what we saw, Crypto lands, whatever, and Superman goes up to him, and they have a tender moment together. And he's saying thank you, and he gives a couple pets, and he gives a little kiss in the nose. And what it actually is David Cornsway surrounded by a crew, hugging and kissing a Nerf ball, duct taped to a hockey stick. And it's like, and we're all looking at it because no one told us what it is. And we're like, holy that has got to be Crypto. Because at that point in time, nobody knew. Yeah. So that was kind of a funny thing. And I kind of wish that moment was in there because that was the thing we kind of saw. And then all the cast came in and seeing Edie, who we've spoken to for years for All Mankind, and talking to him for X-Men First Class 14 years ago or whatever. It was nice to see him play this character, and he was like very open and honest about it. And James Gunn said like he's actually like the lead supporting characters, like of all the other people,
definitely.
It's like it's him and Lois have a lot of screen time together, and he's going to carry this. And we're like, we wish we knew more. Because when he came in, he talked about his feelings. He had mixed feelings about the mask. He thought it was a version of blackface until he read the comics, and then he appreciated what it was, and he loves the tech. Like that's a nanotechnology, and why you see the T, it actually protects his whole head. And they don't get into those details in the film. You just kind of knew through nuance. You just visualize that's how it works. And he talked about his T spheres and his T crafts, and he loves all that. He wanted a big toy line for all that stuff. So I'm glad that we met him because his big role. In the film, but of course in that sequence there is no hot girl or guy, so we didn't get to see them in person, but everyone else we did get to see. So I wanted to give you some more details about that because it was kind of interesting to see what that led to a year later on the big screens.
Well, you alluded to it, and it's kind of, I think, a part of the film realist lore, which wasn't actually covered on this show, but you were of course on the Justice League set visit. So if people were wondering, you can go back and look up Rob's set visit for Justice League. I think the last thing I want to talk about, Rob, before I let you go, is one of the things that I was curious about with all the marketing, because we saw a 5th dimensional imp, which I believe would have to be a Batmite or Mix-a-Spitlick reference, which is the big glowing squid thing that they're fighting, which a lot of people, it wasn't just me, thought maybe Brainiac was going to be involved. But at the end of the day, the thing that I really appreciated, and we're in spoilers, is Lex Luthor is the big bad. And Nicholas Hoult is so good at playing that egotistical, hateful, brilliant person. And the funniest thing to me, I don't know if you caught this reference, is Lex Luthor in every film, at the end of the day, like, yeah, he hates Superman. He's just a real estate mogul. Like, he just wants land. And that always seems to be his motivation.
Luthoria. Look, no one can question Nicholas Hoult. I mean, I love all the Twitter of like people like defending him, saying, look at his filmography, and it's from him as a kid till now. It's like 20 movies. You're like, oh my God. He's led so many different films in different genres, supporting and otherwise. The guy, and he's such a gentleman in real life. I've met him a few times. Awesome dude. He puts in the work. He's easy to work with. And despite all of his experience, like he was on set, like nervous as when James Gunn walked in the room. And I love that. He wanted to make sure he was saying the right thing, that he understood James' vision. And I love that. He just seems like, I understand why you want to work with someone like that, because he can deliver, and he's such a team player. And you watch him having fun on the press tour with the David Rachel of it all. And it's like, man, perfect trio. I love it. I do feel a little bad for Nick Hoult, because one of my gripes, actually, I put this in the bad column, is they went a little too hard on the exposition for Lex. And I didn't love the video gamey bit where he's like hands-on telling every single move that Ultraman needs to do. 1A. 9B. It's like, guys, just really? It's like, and like all the fanboys like having a good time playing the controllers, and it's like, oh man, that stuff is a little cringe. I did like, of course, and this is for any film that had this sort of scenario would happen, like the not a revolt, but the people like questioning Lex and what he's doing when he's opening the rift. I like those extra characters that were the smart ones in the room.
Yeah, the one guy looked like Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
The stash guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was awesome. He had the big crazy expressions. Yeah, more of that guy. He was cool. It's it is what it is. You have to accept it. By the way, normally, I didn't even write this down. I was thinking in my head. I say write it down. I'll write down in my head notes. Normally a film like this, I would come to you and be so upset with how they handled the political of it all, the Lex Luthor motivations and all the goofiness. But like in modern society, like this is all totally realistic.
Yep.
It's so sad, but it's like I just have to accept it now. I have been desensitized by real life to accept the most insane comic
Everything
booky
he
version
gets
of
away
Lex
with.
Luthor. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
it totally makes sense. Of course, he's doing things for the government. I mean, just look what's happening. Just turn on Twitter right now. Like
Yep.
that's more unbelievable. So that is hilariously sad that I just accept that now, as opposed to because it's not. It cannot. There's no legitimate way I can use that as a gripe against this film because it's based on reality. It's one of the most real things in the film. That's sad. But yeah, I mean, I just found they went a little too over the top with Lex at moments. But I also thought it was surprising that they just he gets arrested at the end, which is whatever. But he got publicly shamed in a way where like, oh, okay, there's no way he can rise to the top now. You know what I mean?
Until
Maybe.
he runs for president.
Yeah, I mean, maybe actually said that, but it just seems so over the top. Like the whole like lie about Superman, the epic failure, and now all those prisoners coming out and he's shooting the innocent. There's no coming back from that now. So it does make me wonder like if there's a path for
Injustice
Lex
Gang.
Luthor. Yeah, I'm very curious like long term because Lex Luthor's a long term player for sure. He's going to be a big bet whether he comes back in the future or he's playing behind the scenes in a smaller part for a while. I do wonder because part of his whole thing is like he is a big public presence and they've kind of destroyed that by the end of this film. So
they say he goes to Belle Reve, but again, looking at the real world, he's probably just found innocent.
Yeah.
Right? Like jokingly aside. Okay, I lied. There is one other thing, and it was one of the elements I was really looking forward to seeing. It turns out it's not a post-credit scene. You're in full spoilers, people. So this is the last spoiler, which is Millie Alcock's appearance at the very end as Supergirl. What did you like? I've read that comic, so knowing that version of Kara was going to be a part of this universe.
I was going to ask you that. I literally have the physical book. I intentionally did not read it because I wanted to see the movie first and then read that ahead of the next movie. Not when I see that movie, I mean the Superman, because I knew there was going to be a thing for her, but I kind of wanted to see their version of it before I read the whole book. But I'm very well aware we had done some stuff for that film.
Did you just go visit? I guess you could tell us.
So yeah, I mean, it was rightfully kind of shocking just because of how like intense her personality is in terms of how it clashes with Clark's. But I like that Crypto's her dog. I like the jacket on top. I like that he calls him bitch or whatever later. I'm like, I'm kind of in for that. So not knowing about that comic other than, what we write about it and just, I don't know. It was felt so like very intentionally. It really sticks out, but not like a sore thumb. It sticks out in a way that's kind of gets me curious and excited for what's next. So
like picture that going against Jason Momoa's Lobo, like
in
that,
space,
which is
that sounds awesome. I mean, and look, just to bring it full circle. Look, I said this movie has to be good, and that's what James Gunn was going to do, and I love that. These films are not happening until him and Peter Safran, his co-partner and co-head of DC Studios, they got to give it that stamp of approval. If it means a delay, no one gives. And one of the messages we got from the executive producer and like the head of comms for DC Studios is that what's the quote? I wrote it on my set visit twice, but it's like these can be something like consistent but not canonical. Like they're not locked down by like a timeline or goofiness. Like quality films trumps your confusion over when a character shows up. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is the individual storytelling. And I'm like, you know what? After what we've seen from Star Wars and Marvel and previous versions of DC, that's the only way forward in a business like this where it's complicated. So yeah, Supergirl came first. Supergirl was not part of the plan to come this early, but that script, it came together quick. And Batman, not there yet. So it's getting delayed. And I don't mean Matt Reeves is the Batman part 2. I mean the Brave and the Bold or whatever they're trying to do over there. That I believe that's going to be retooled because I don't think it's working. But I love that these things are happening based on when the script is awesome. That's when it gets the green light. So, and Gunn being intimately involved, he honestly doesn't miss. The Suicide Squad is great. And if you go back and rewatch it, it holds up and gets better with more watch because there's so many little details in there that go unappreciated. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I do have to run, but I'm happy that you and I are here having a positive conversation about the beginning of something that's going to be big. And Superman of all people, it's about time. Yeah, it's fun, and they all went for it. I love that we have a universe now that's crazy and accepts all. Audiences are just ready, man. Like for pocket dimensions, they've seen all the Marvel. I mean, 2 years ago, you look at the Barbie. Barbie's a weird movie. You have these things coming in real life, and it made $1.3 billion or whatever. So yeah, there is no weird anymore. This is how it is, and this is what this universe is based on. And now there's no limit. There's literally no limit to what from the comics can come to the live screen as long as they got a good character story to tell. And that is awesome.
Can I ask you a question?
Just one?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week was, what is your favorite Superman suit? To answer, you could email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com. You could comment directly below on the social media post or within YouTube and Anchor. Jermaine from Chicago, my favorite Kal-El suit, that's what we DC diehards call him, would be the New 52 suit. Interesting. It shows how powerful he is built and also shows the cape attached to the front of the suit. Okay. Scotty Cameron goes, I would probably have to go with the second Rebirth suit, the one that brought back Superman's red boots, because the first Rebirth suit removed them for whatever reason. There also is a suit in Superman and Lois that he really likes. I think those are the neat ways to modernize Superman's look from the 1940s while maintaining a level of iconography. I also want to give a shout out to the Superman suit from the Legion of Superheroes finale when he merged with Superman X to fight Brainiac. Okay. Dylan writes in, favorite Superman suit would be the one from the animated series or Christopher Reeve, but I don't think those are doing anything radical that's different from the classic comics. We don't need to reinvent the wheel with Superman's costume. Ulrich, I believe it's Rydell, said Tyler Hoechlin's very first suit in Superman and Lois. Ryan Hipp says Henry Cavill's suit in Man of Steel. Dr. Derp, My Adventures with Superman. James Strecker, Superman the Animated Series. Legacy Odinson said Brandon Routh, Crisis on Infinite Earth suit. Strange on TikTok said Brandon Routh suit from Crisis as well. Melissa Lutz 219 says Man of Steel suit. It almost looks like it's metal, so it could withstand more. The Phantasm writes, I think in terms of translating a suit from the comics to live action, the best made suit is Superman's suit, the Kingdom Come version. I don't like the Kingdom Come design as much as the classic, but I think it's far best live action suit. And then Legacy gave us some non-spoiler thoughts on the film as a whole. My thoughts on the movie itself are very favorable. Unapologetically cape, full of color and life with a strong, consistent emotional through line. It's not a perfect movie. Some of the dialogue was less than outstanding in places, but on the whole, it's maybe the most comic book movie I've ever seen. In every way, good, and on some bad ways, truly a breath of optimistic air. Thank you to everybody who submitted their answers to question of the week. Next week's review is going to be of Sandman Season 2, Volume 1. I haven't had a chance to cover it yet. There's been way too many blockbusters, so I'm giving next week's episode its full spotlight. What is your favorite comic that is not in Marvel or DC? There's an argument about if Vertigo is a part of DC, but they kind of play on their own. So what is your favorite graphic novel or comic book series that isn't mainline DC? You can email the podcast at filmreelistspod@gmail.com. You can @filmreelist on any of the social medias. Just make sure to include the hashtag QOTW. That would be amazing. If you haven't, make sure you're following the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a 5-star review. It helps the show get further into the algorithms. And as said already, next week's episode is going to be a review of The Sandman Season 2, Volume 1. Well, thank you, Rob, for being a part of the podcast for your 8th appearance. You can find Rob on all the social medias at Rob_Keyes, Keyes, Screen Rant, all those sites. If you want to be following all the latest movie and TV, comics, and video game news, you can find him there. Rob, I know you got to go. Thanks so much, buddy. Love you. I'm sure
Cheers,
we'll
man.
talk soon.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.